Hello and welcome to Geology Concepts. Today, we are going to discuss a very important topic for your upcoming mains 2024. As you know, answer evaluation is a very important aspect of the mains answer writing journey, right? So if you are not evaluating your answers till now and you are writing your answers on a regular basis, this video will be very helpful for you. So the first thing that we need to understand is, in this video, we will be discussing about how to self-evaluate your answers. So evaluation, as I said, is a very important part of your mains answer writing journey. And most of us don't know how to self-evaluate, or in that case, most of us don't even evaluate our answers, right? So self-evaluation, how to do it, this will be a complete guide on how to self-evaluate your mains answers. And it will be immensely helpful if you follow these steps and check your answers or evaluate your answers accordingly, right? So let's get started. So the first thing that we need to understand is, why do we resist ourselves from self-evaluation, right? What are the resistances are there, and why we don't self-evaluate our answers? So if you see, there are two types of aspirants in any type of exam, right? Aspirant A and B. So the aspirant A, who is constantly afraid of or constantly have a fear of failure. So what happens is, most of the time what we do is we think whatever answer that we are writing is not good enough, and for that reason we don't even self-evaluate our answers, and we are afraid of reviewing our own mistakes, right? We are afraid of reviewing our own strengths and weaknesses. So the fear of failure constantly resists us from the self-evaluation. Then on the extreme end, there are aspirants who are very overconfident about their answers, right? So most of the aspirants fall in two categories. One is who is constantly in the fear of failure, and the other one is overconfident. That means even if their answer is good, or even if they're writing answers, they don't even go back and reevaluate their answers or check their answer again, thinking that their answer is good anyway. So they think that whatever we have written is good enough, and examiner is going to give us very good mark in the examination, and that's why they don't even go back and self-evaluate their answers. And the most common problem for which most of the aspirants don't self-evaluate their answer is, there are no reference point or set standards on or parameters based on which we can evaluate our answers, because UPSC doesn't prescribe any standards. There is no standard. कोई स्टैंडर्ड नहीं है. यूपीएससी ने कहीं पे बोला नहीं है कि इस स्टैंडर्ड्स पे आपके कॉपीज चेक होते हैं. So that's why most of us are clueless about how to go about evaluating our answers and how to check our answers perfectly. So I'll remind you again, whatever the parameters that I'll tell you in this video are not something that are prescribed by UPSC. These standards are very generalized, and this can be implemented in any essay type answer writing, right? So if you are doing any essay type answer writing or descriptive answer writing, you can incorporate these parameters into self-evaluation or evaluating formats, right? So these are the problems for which most of the aspirants resist themselves from the self-evaluation part, right? And due to which there are consequences you have to face. The first consequence is that whatever mistakes that you are repeating in your making in your answers, you are going to repeat them again and again if you are not self-evaluating in your answers, right? If you're not knowing that what are the problems that are there in your answer writing skills, then you are going to repeat those mistakes in the actual exam itself, right? And also क्या होता है, क्योंकि reference point नहीं है, तो we don't go back and see other toppers copies or other fellow aspirants who are writing good answers. So we don't get an idea of innovation, how to draw diagrams, flowcharts, which we have talked in our previous video as well. If you have not seen that yet, you should go back and see how the diagrams and tables and flowcharts can be used as a part of your innovative skill in the answer writing part, right? So what happens is, since there is no reference point, most of us don't go back and recheck our answers based on certain parameters, and due to which we lack innovation, and that the answer seems very mundane, and we represent in a very generalized manner, which gives an impression of bad representation to the examiner itself, and that's why most of the aspirants fail in the main stage as well. And as you know, main stage is the most crucial stage because it has most of the marks, right? सो जितना भी मार्क्स आपके हैं उसका पूरा 2/3 मार्क्स आपके मेंस के स्टेज में ही है. सो मेन स्टेज होल्ड्स वेरी सिग्निफिकेंट वेटेज इन टर्म्स ऑफ योर डिसाइडिंग योर रैंक इन द फाइनल लिस्ट, राइट. सो यहाँ पे ही अगर आप गलतियाँ कर रहे हो then you are already eliminated from the race, right? So these are the resistance and these are the consequences of not evaluating your answers, right? But if you evaluate your answers, what are the benefits that we also need to understand? The first thing is it's a part of your revision as well. देखो आप क्या करते हो, पहले you study or you make relevant content for a question, right? Then you write your answer. So this writing your answer forms the first stage of your revision, right? And then if you go back and self-evaluate your written answer, then that forms your second part of revision. Second part of revision is your self-evaluation, right? So if you're self-evaluating your answer, that forms your second part of revision, which is unknowingly you are actually revising your content again and again, which eventually what will happen? This revision will make you aware of your strengths and weaknesses based on which you can play in the actual mains exam. And if you combine these two parameters, that is the revision parameter and knowing your actual strengths and weaknesses, you will be able to curate better answers in the actual exam, right? So if there is a question जो कि out of the syllabus आया है या फिर there is a question which you don't have very good knowledge about, you can still write a very good answer if you know your strengths and weaknesses, how you write in the exam, how you can make certain points from a particular concept and write relevant points if you don't even know what to write in a particular question which is asked out of syllabus. तो ऐसे questions जब आएंगे आपको ये revision और आपका strength और weakness अगर आपको पता है, you will be able to do it very easily in the actual mains exam, right? So that's why we need to self-evaluate your answers. Now, the most important thing, which is the discussion of today's session, is how do we review our own answers. So what are the steps that you need to follow before you review your own answers? So the first step is you have already written your answer. So the assumption here is that you have already written your written answers. So you have written answers. Now you need to evaluate them. So how do you evaluate them? The first step is, before you review your answer, you should first read the question again. Read the question again. Whatever the question that you have written as your answers, again reread that question from the test series or your PYQ, whatever source you have followed. Go back there and read that question again and understand what was asked in the exam or the test, right? क्योंकि मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम क्या होता है, हम जब लिखते हैं आंसर, वी फॉरगेट अबाउट व्हाट आर द डिमांड्स. वी ओनली राइट व्हाटएवर वी नो अबाउट दैट पर्टिकुलर कॉन्टेक्स्ट और अ पर्टिकुलर सब्जेक्ट. सो इन ऑर्डर टू इवैल्यूएट यू हैव टू बी न्यूट्रल फर्स्ट. कोई बायसेस दिमाग में रख के अपनी कॉपीज चेक मत करना, बिकॉज दैट विल डिफीट द वेरी पर्पज ऑफ द सेल्फ इवैल्यूएशन. डोंट कीप एनी बायसेस इन योर माइंड एंड reread the question and think what you are understanding right now. अगर पढ़ने के बाद आपको लग रहा है that there are certain other aspects that needs to be incorporated, so you have to evaluate your answers accordingly, right? Then the second stage is you have to see that what impression your answer creates upon yourself. You should stand as a examiner's point of view. You should see your answer from an examiner point of view and not as an aspirant, right? If you are self-evaluating your answer, you have already written the answer, you have done your part. Now you should view your answer from the examiner's standpoint. The first thing that the examiner will see is a impression. What impression it creates? If your handwriting is legible, if you are writing in paragraphs or lines, if there is spacing between those paragraphs or lines, if there are absence of struck words or sentences. मतलब आप अगर लिख रहे हो उसमें 1000 जगह आप काट छाट रहे हो and it is looking messy, then it is not a good impression on the examiner, right? So these parameters need to be studied first or seen first if you are going to self-evaluate your answer, right? So second stage में फर्स्ट स्टेप में आपने क्वेश्चन पढ़ लिया पूरा अच्छे से, फिर से उसको अंडरस्टैंड किया उसके डिमांड्स को. सेकंड में क्या इंप्रेशन ये आपके दिमाग में डाल रहा है, आपका आंसर खुद के ऊपर क्या इंप्रेशन डाल रहा है, यू हैव टू री-इवैल्यूएट दैट एंड इट शुड बी inviting and it will please the evaluator to give you marks, right? So this is the second step, impression. Then comes the third stage where the actual evaluation starts. The third stage is your structuring, right? So I have already said in multiple videos that never write in paragraphs. Why? Because paragraphs are very clumsy in nature, and if there are only paragraphs and no diagrams or short or crisp points, then it makes the examiner's job difficult. So examiner का job ही difficult हो रहा है कि आपको आपके पूरे आंसर से वो स्कीम थ्रू करके पहले फिर से उसको मतलब रेलिवेंट पॉइंट्स आइडेंटिफाई करके आपको मार्क्स दे, देन इट विल बी very difficult for him or her to give you marks, because there are multiple copies that he or she has to check in a particular day. So we have to make his job easier, not difficult, right? So if there is structure, if the structure is absent in form of intro, body and conclusion, and if you are not writing in points and you are writing in lengthy paragraphs, then this definitely there will be deduction in your marks. So keep this in mind. Structuring is the third stage. Now in the third stage, the first thing that you need to see is your introduction. If you are introducing your answers well, so the thumb rule is that the introduction should not exceed more than 2 to 3 lines, right? So 2 to 3 lines is the standard criteria for writing any introduction. Then the content should be relevant as per the demand of the question and not something that you know, right? अगर सिर्फ definition लिख रहे हो या you are making valid points or a holistic coverage of the question itself, then see that if you are writing, how you are writing your introduction. If you are writing only definition and not the thesis of the question or the demand of the question, then you should deduct half mark or 1 mark accordingly, because this introduction needs to incorporate the essence of your total answer, right? So 2 to 3 lines based on the demand of the question and not only definition. If you are writing definition, that's good as well, but उसमें full mark आपको introduction वाले part में जितना मिलना चाहिए, that will not be given to you by the evaluator. So you should keep that in mind. Then comes the main body. Now this is the most important part, because it should address all the parts of the question. So if a question has 3 parts in form of what is certain thing, why is that thing is happening, and how is it happening. So 3 part है एक question के, then your body must include this what, why and how in a step-by-step manner, in a concise manner, and this what, why and how should be clearly mentioned as subheads in your body, right? So if you are missing on any part, so अगर आप अभी re-evaluate कर रहे हो and you see that this how part is missing in your answer, then you have to deduct 1/3 mark, because अगर 3 part है question के, then आप 10 mark का अगर question है तो उसमें सब में 3 marks what, why and how को मिला हुआ है. So if you miss on any part, then you have to deduct your marks accordingly. 1/3 marks should be deducted, right? And then marks must be deducted if main points are not substantiated with examples. So examples are very important, as I said, in most of the geology answers. You see that there are very few examples that people are giving, right? So you need to make your answer stand out. You need to have a USP, as I said in the previous video. You have to have a USP in your answer, right? So that USP is if you are writing good examples, if you are drawing good diagrams, if you are making flowcharts, if you are writing in short and crisp points, and you are highlighting your relevant keywords, then that will be your USP. And example is a big USP in any answers, right? So if you are writing any example, if you are writing 10 points, suppose you are writing 10 points, then you should at least give 3 to 4 points with examples and substantiate them accordingly. And if that is missing in your answer, that is, if there is a justification, illustration or validation is missing in your answer, then you have to deduct your marks accordingly, right? Then finally comes the conclusion part. So intro and body are done. Then finally you have to end your answer in a conclusion. As I said, most of the answers won't have any conclusion because किसी को पता नहीं कि हमें conclusion के साथ end करना चाहिए. The answer should be coherent and must have a flow, right? So conclusion is the end of your answer. So that should be clearly written. Conclusion should be written in your answer. There should be a conclusion. ऐसे abruptly end मत करना body लिख. There should be a conclusion. So what should be the nature of the conclusion? The nature of the conclusion should be that it should also have a valid point or a valid argument in the end, right? And it should not be a repetition of statements or whatever the summary that you are writing in your body or introduction. It should not be repeated in your conclusion. It should be unique, right? ये थोड़ा अलग होना चाहिए. इसमें value addition होना चाहिए. If you are not doing any value addition, why will the examiner giving you marks, right? So there should be a value addition. And if you are doing, if you are writing a conclusion, it should not be repetitive in nature, and it should not mention the repetitive statements in your conclusion, right? And if you're doing this, then cut 1 mark. If you're repeating the same sentences again and again, then you have to cut 1 mark there, right? So value addition needs to be done, right? Value addition you have to do in your conclusion. For example, if there is a question on Pauling's rule, whatever you have written in your introduction and body, that is okay about Pauling's rule. Then in the conclusion, you can write about the limitation or its significance or application in geology. So that can be your conclusion, which will be different from whatever you have written in your body and introduction, and it will also be a value addition to the whole answer. So this is how you need to review your own answer, and you should not keep any biases that you are writing the best answer, that you have written or you have written a very bad answer. That biases should not be there. When you are evaluating your answer, evaluate from the examiner's standpoint, right? View it as a copy that as an examiner would check, right? So this is something that you need to do. So what are the basic standards that we have just discussed? This is a summary that the answer should have clarity, consistency. So 4 C's needs to be ensured. What are those 4 C's? Clarity, consistency, conciseness and coherence, right? Clarity होना चाहिए आंसर में. It should be clearly written, not messy. काटना छाटना नहीं होना चाहिए. Messy मतलब बहुत सारा struck down words नहीं होना चाहिए. Clarity होना चाहिए, consistency होना चाहिए. Whatever asked in the question, that should be mentioned clearly in the exam, in the answer itself. Consistency होना चाहिए, concise होना चाहिए, not writing in paragraphs and writing it in point format, keeping the demand of the question in mind, और उसी के around ही आप लिख रहे हो. And coherence होना चाहिए between the different parts of the question, right? So if you are doing all this, if you are ensuring these 4 C's, award yourself 60% of the marks. So we have seen most of the exams, highest mark that UPSC gives is 60%, right? अगर topper है, तो topper का mark 60% ही होता है. So we will be taking that as the standard. So if there is a 10 marker question and you are ensuring these 4 C's, then give yourself 6 marks, right? Depending on whatever, this is the highest mark that you should give. And if there is any part that is missing, then you have to deduct your marks accordingly. For example, if you are writing a good content, but there is a lack of intro or conclusion, then deduct 1 to 2 marks and give yourself 3 to 4 marks, right? So, अगर 10 mark का question है, उसमें intro and conclusion are missing, then 2 marks will be deducted and you will get 4 marks. This is the idea about how to self-evaluate your answer, right? Then most of the aspirant has a question कि grammar important है कि नहीं. So if you are writing in points and not lengthy sentences, there is very few chance that you are writing any bad grammatic error or bad sentences, right? So that's why I'm saying that you need to write in points and not in paragraphs, right? So if you are doing that, it's okay. And one thing that you need to keep in mind is that grammar is not so important as long as the examiner's point of view, and as long as you are ensuring that you are communicating the idea of your answer clearly to the examiner. So communication is important in your answer. If you are communicating your answer well, grammar is not that important. So don't deduct your mark if you write anything wrong in terms of grammatical error, right? But if the presentation is bad, it is illegible, then definitely deduct marks 0.5 to 1 mark. If it is illegible or you are striking down more words, then it should be in your answer, right? And finally, you need to understand that it's the game of answer is impression. What impression you are reflecting on the examiner, that's all. That is all that matters. Whatever you are writing, it should give a good impression to the examiner. And that will only happen if all the elements, that is the 4 C's that we have talked, the clarity, consistency, conciseness and coherence, if those things are maintained, it will eventually, the whole answer will be in sync. Intro, body and conclusion will be linked to each other, and it will always reflect a good impression on the examiner. And if you are doing this, you will be able to know that how much marks you can secure in the मेंस एग्जाम itself. मेंस में कितना मार्क आ सकता है, आप इससे एक रफ आइडिया लगा सकते हो. So if you are not evaluating your answers from the experts and you are doing it on your own, this is the guide which will help you to how to go about evaluating your own answers, right? So that is all. If you need help or expert evaluation from our side, from Geology Concept, we are always happy to help you. हमारे पास जो subjective test series है, it ensures you that you write the answers in a clear and concise manner. We ensure that you are focusing on these 4 C's, right? So these are the parameters based on which we also evaluate your answers and give you feedbacks and expert evaluation, right? So if you want that, you can always join the test series designed by Geology Concept for the year 24-25, right? So that's all. I'll leave you today with this idea. I hope you gained some insightful knowledge from this video. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.